Hello, everyone. This is episode 64. And before this completely goes off the rails, we're doing the alignments again, and we have a new guest. Hi, Ben.
Hi.
What are your favorite three books and your favorite character?
Definitely Turncoat, Summer Night, and probably Proven Guilty for number three. And
Okay.
yeah, and then favorite character, Charity Carpenter. At the very least, she laughs at Binder's jokes when Michael just blushes. That's wonderful. She's got a past.
I don't like him. Yes, Summer Nights in his top three, and he picked Charity as a favorite character.
I know, right? Like, director, I thought you vetted these people.
Yeah,
You...
get out.
Out. Okay, but we're not going to let you get off that easy. So why? I mean, I get the Charity has a past thing, but why Summer Night? Why Proven Guilty?
Well, I think they're. I'm really into the conceit of the Dresden Files as a kind of a detective story, and I really like the Turncoat. I think is by far the best in that regard because every little vignette ties into that very nicely. There's not a lot of the A plot, B plot thing like there's in Death Masks, for example, where it's basically two different stories that are just kind of interwoven that happen at the same time and with a similar theme, right? But I think Turncoat, everything really drives it forward to the double climax thing that Jim Butcher does, right?
I mean, I think Turncoat is good. I'm not a big fan of Summer Night.
Summer Night is.
I'm just really a fan of. I like the way he builds up the fairy cosmology and the confrontation of just Mab versus Titania looking at each other with him and turning away. I found was great. It also did the kill a fairy lady thing earlier than Cold Days did, and so I have to give it an advantage over Cold Days. So
right
with the Nemesis.
When I went through, I think especially my last read through, and it's been a year or two still, but I gave Summer Night some props because it was really kind of the first book where he made it to the climax without having gotten his entire ass kicked. And without being like, oh man, I've got like 3 limbs in a sling and I lost my gun and we're going to go do this. Whereas I felt like the first 3 books, he had already been in a major fight before he had even gotten to the climax. And so we had never really seen him at his peak. And so like that was one of the things. And I mean, the Summer Night definitely helps expand the universe. But my first read through it was definitely not one of my favorites. So.
Yeah. The series definitely ramps up, but part of the problem for me is on reflection, I never really like reading about ghosts or necromancers or zombies or or vampires, and that's 90% of the series. But I love the series for all the charm that it has, despite that. Right? That's not my predilection for favorite kind of genre, but it has such charm, and the characters are usually so well written by about book 4 or 5 that I find it very admirable in a lot of ways.
Okay, so what's your beef with the undead then?
Just a personal preference, personal taste. It's definitely you got to have it in
What's your beef with Ocean's 13?
Ocean's 13.
Why is Skin Games not on there? Which is clearly the best book.
Well, he kind of stumbles a bit in a couple spots. I was just rereading Skin Games. I love the heist bit. But there's so many little superfluous little scenes, and I don't think the double climax works quite as well. But if nothing else, the dream sequence with Lash was kind of irritating. Went on way too long, especially in the audiobook. I noticed it. And then Uriel's comments about loaning Grace, which I guess was okay, but then he'd become mortal and then he'd fall, was just so inelegant. And it doesn't make sense based on what I know of Christian theology that it really was took me out of the story moment. But there's a lot to admire in Skin Game. I love the con. I love the Goodman Gray. I love Binder, but Binder's in Turncoat, and Turncoat's already one of my 3.
Binder is so much better in Skin Games than in Turncoat.
He is. I will say that he is, but he's a wonderful, charming, cunning little sorcerer. Yeah, I guess not really sorcerer, but
I was going to say when he talks about the plan for how to get to Harry's apartment and that last scene on the beach where they're talking about how the vampires are all misunderstood and they're like, "Nah, fuck that."
Yeah, right.
He was great in Turncoat.
Too right. Binder, it's just wonderful.
Too right.
You gotta have a polar if you're going to say that.
All right, I'm going to turn us to our topic and our resident beloved guest of EG, also known as Jake. I'm sorry we're doing this, but thank you for joining us and yelling at us for it, I'm sure.
Well, it's easier to do this than in the comments section because now it's just like right on the money.
Right, it's right in the moment. You're gonna see he's got no prep time. So the walking encyclopedia at work, right? So
Well, I mean, I'm sacrificing Reddit points for this, so I just want that to be clear.
guess you're gonna have to post another Lord of the Rings gift to make up for it.
This is what Reddit does to people. EG came to Reddit specifically because of Dresden Files. He wasn't a Redditor that much before, as I understand it, and now he's like,
at all.
I gotta have karma. You know, like I'm giving up karma right now, just so you know.
The problem was I got gold for a post that I never expected to get gold for. And I saw the perks of it. It was like, okay, so I see the new comments. I see the everything. So then I posted a few things thinking, all right, maybe this will work. And then this last one was just absurd. I got like 3 gildings for it for no reason. I didn't make that thing. I just found it and it worked.
Easy. I've never had gold.
I can't afford to give you gold. I'm sorry.
But I've heard it's like, I think it's like what you're talking about is how moderators see subreddits they mod with new comments and stuff. We can see that.
Well, yeah, it allows me to alter the theme. It allows me to see the new comments and like it'll highlight the new comments instead of just going
By the way, we're actually not shills for Reddit. I just want to say that.
Surprise!
Then why are we all on it?
What do you mean? Didn't you know?
It's where we met. Reddit. It's where we met. You know, we're all old high school buddies, right? So, but I mean, that's how this podcast got started. So that's why we've got a unfair advantage.
Yeah, something.
Bias.
Yeah, bias. Bias is a good word. Okay, so who are we starting with, director?
Apparently, the list is Ebenezer starting with because no one decided to move the order around.
Lawful evil. Just kidding. I just had to get everybody get your hackles up and get everybody.
We're already arguing about Star Wars. We're all warmed up. We can.
Yeah, hackles were prepared.
Yeah, but we agreed way too much on that. That was a civil discussion.
I disagree with that. How about that?
We should argue ethics. See what happens.
Well, we're about to. I think.
And civics, ethics, and civics. Let's
right.
start with Stormfront.
Ebenezer.
Oh no, that's Stormfront.
Oh yeah,
Ebenezer and Harry is, in my opinion, both chaotic good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he falls in the same category as Harry.
You think he's still chaotic good, huh? Okay.
I would say Ebenezer is much more neutral good because he has to break the laws. So kind of by definition, he can't, but he has to do things for very good reasons, but less chaotic. He doesn't have the, I'm going to park right in front of the building just to fuck you chaoticness.
No, but he has to. I'm going to do what I think is right, which is what chaotic good is, in my book anyway. Is I will do what I think is the right thing to do, and I don't care what the rules are.
I think Ebenezer has less than that. He's doing doing things that are actually right, whether or not it hurts or helps him.
Yeah, without regard to rules or tradition, is how he's acting. His ultimate. He ultimately wants to do what is good, what is right. He doesn't deliberately scoff at rules or tradition, but he also isn't slavishly following them or beholden to them. So I think the neutral good is by far the best for Ebenezer.
I would harken back to the conversation he has with Listens to Wind, where he is like, they talk about what world we live in versus the world we should aspire to. Mm-hmm. Where he's like, we need to aspire to the world that we want to live in, if it's ever to be, which I think speaks to his whole mindset of doing what he thinks is the right thing, regardless of the rules or necessarily, like blowing up Chichen Itza, for example.
But he's not deliberately scoffing at the rules either. He's part of the Great Council, but he also tries to uphold the White Council to an extent. I mean, he tells Ancient Mai to go stuff it. I'm not going to help you on Demon Reach. But he also convinces Harry to bring Morgan in safely and alive. So I think neutral good is really the sweet spot for him.
He doesn't convince Harry to bring Morgan in safely and alive.
Well,
Harry's already decided to do that.
Well, Morgan was the one who decided to be turned in.
Yeah, Morgan decided to be turned in, but Ebenezer was trying to press the issue and promised to bring Morgan in alive before Harry agreed to it. So he's still beholden to some degree to upholding the White Council, even though he's part of the Grey One and founded it.
I think
DG, go. Sorry, I was going to make sure you got in.
I was going to say, because part of the conversation they have in Blood Rights, where Harry's like, okay, so I got mouthy with you, after he finds out that he's the Blackstaff, why didn't you kill me like you were supposed to? And he very specifically says, what is the point of having a license to ignore the will of the council if you never use it? And I think he's informed by Langtree. I think he's a natural counterbalance to him, which is why he trends more chaotic, even if he likes to uphold the council because he knows what the council could be. He's not upholding the council as it is necessarily. In order to do that, you have to go to the other end of the spectrum. So between the two of them, you got a pretty neutral good type of body. But I think both of them skew much more towards their respective scales.
So you're saying as a foil to Langtree, he's chaotic?
Yeah, I don't necessarily... He's not chaotic just to be chaotic, but he's chaotic because it's a need. He's chaotic because he sees that if you just completely go along, if you're only defensive-minded... He's been complaining about that since Summer Night, about how the council's not even moving against the Reds. So he does what he thinks should be done, what he thinks is right, because if you keep doing it this way, we're all going to die.
Well, and I'm trying to feel it out because stupid, and this will be on the internet forever, but I didn't even think about in relation to the Blackstaff, right? I was thinking about, his personality, what we see in Blood Rights and things like that. Because, for example, Heath, you said he didn't park in a handicapped spot or anything like that, like Harry does, but he does have a shotgun in his back window, whether it's illegal or not, because he could give a fuck. He's too old to give a fuck in a lot of ways. But to me, I'm trying to break down the good, for example, is to me, lawful good is doing good the right way. There's a right way and a wrong way to do something, and we're going to do good the right way. Chaotic good is we're going to do good regardless the cost, in a way. It's not necessarily that far, but it's we'll break the rules if we need to do it. And then to me, neutral good is doing good for goodness sake. Do as much good as you can wherever you can, regardless, in a way. And I don't know if that's right, but that's what's coming to mind. And he definitely, they both will break the rules if they're necessary, but not necessarily as a rule, if that makes sense.
But I think Harry will do it spitefully. Because it's a rule, I'm going to break it. Because you're an authority figure, I'm not going to sign your documents, right? Whereas Ebenezer goes along with it because it's procedure and there's no reason not to. So I think Ebenezer defaults a little bit less chaotic.
A little bit. I think Harry got fostered that. But Ebenezer fostered that in Harry a little bit because he doesn't really get that streak as much as freely because Justin is a slave driver as far as mentors go.
It could be a temperament inherited from Margaret.
Sure.
Which
or from
inherited from
Ebenezer.
Right. Or it could be an effect of black magic too, because he does kill a guy with magic, and that does leave some trace impression upon the personality too.
And Ebenezer has the Blackstaff to protect him from those effects,
but Harry doesn't.
Yeah, and neither did Margaret.
Harry was obstinate even before he got his magic.
The other
we get tidbits from his childhood at the
ghost story.
No, not the
orphanage.
What's it called when you orphanage? And we get tidbits.
The tidbits from the orphanage I thought were after he got the magic.
No, he didn't get magic until basically he got adopted a week later or something.
Yeah, it
after
was really
magic.
Yeah, his magic started
when he used his magic to jump really far. Justin found him a week later or something, or 2 weeks later.
And he started that magic to jump really far because these two big kids were bullies for no reason, and he wanted to show them up. So he's being obstinate and stubborn at that time. That chaotic streak started back then. And for Ebenezer, every time that he breaks the rule, it kind of costs him, and he really tries not to. And so he does it only for the very good reasons that he taught Harry.
Right. I see in Ebenezer, there might be an inclination one way or another, but his deliberate choice is to kind of thread the needle and find a balance between upholding a law and subverting it or ignoring it. And there seems to be very careful deliberation on his part not to be a rule breaker for the sake of it, and not to be a rule follower for the sake of it, but to kind of discern the good.
Yeah, but that's very much what I think a chaotic good character is. You're not. But just because you're chaotic good doesn't mean you're like, oh, I'm gonna break all the rules. It's just I'm gonna do what I think is right. So if what I think is right follows the rules, I mean, you're not gonna break those rules because you do what you think is right.
Chaotic good, like a character like Harry, is going to be like, I don't care exactly what the rules are. I'm going to save the girl. And then neutral good, as I see Ebenezer, is going like, you have to take a step back and look at the cost of saving that girl, and is it worth it? The cost of everything else. And for Harry, the chaotic good, yes.
Yeah, Ebenezer does ask that question. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be willing to bet Ebenezer was much more obviously like Harry in the times like that French and Indian War stuff we get hints about.
I would definitely
New Madrid.
And he's basically what Harry would be given another 150 years. Like, he's learned how not to be obstinate for the sake of being obstinate, but he's also, it's ingrained in him to the point where he knows that the right thing is the right thing either way, and he's going to do what he's going to do.
Which is another fun parallel between them.
Oh, sorry.
As I was saying, it's another fun parallel between the two characters is that, that they are similar. I definitely think that Ebenezer is an older Harry and Harry is a younger Ebenezer to an extent. That Ebenezer kind of has a mantle. He has his black staff, and Harry has the Winter Knight's mantle. They both have these extra things that puts more responsibility on them, that gives them more power, etc., which is like different but the same, like they're very parallel characters.
But I just want to caution the mantles, the power-ups thing, because I mean, we have Word of Jim that hints that every single one of the senior council members is way beefier than they look like on screen. They've all gone through the same things. They've all got these power-ups that nobody knows. Like, we got a little taste of it from Listens to Win. We don't know what powers his shape-shifting, but Jim has said that's not magic. It has less to do with magic than you think. So there's something else going on there.
I'm thinking it's like faith magic, more like, not really magic, like, because he's an Indian and something like that. Maybe, I don't know.
Right.
Or talisman, something like the wolf belt, but on a much bigger.
Well, you see him doing the shuffling little dance in the initial confrontation with Shag Nasty, and so he might have learned that from the Diné. It sounds like.
That's reasonable.
So to me, I feel like the breakdown is Ebenezer probably more neutral good because he's trending lawful, at least at this point in time. And Harry, to me, definitely in this conversation, I'm still going chaotic good. Like, there was some back and forth in the subreddit when we posted this there, where there's some people had suggested he was neutral good. I kind of took the Wizards of the Coast did like a survey, right? And those surveys are never perfect. They're just a gimmick anyway. It's a fun way to spend time. But when I tried to answer it like Harry, it kind of came out neutral good. So there's still a little bit there too. Because the challenge is, like, we focus on Harry being obstinate and thwarting people and whatever. But the other piece I wanted to bring up is like his relationship with Ebenezer is fully respectful, at least until he finds out about the Black Staff, right? He's the only person he calls sir, right? So there's a lot of respect and everything there too.
Shall we move on? Or did we have more thoughts to share?
No.
Okay. The next one on the list, unless we want to skip anything, would be Thomas, because we kind of talked about him previously about Ortega, so might as well finish the conversation about Thomas.
And we said chaotic evil, right?
For Thomas?
You guys
obviously lawful evil. Come on.
No, for Thomas, I think that definitely, at least until his Shag Nasty intervention, he seemed really in the same vein as like a Drizzt or something, a dual wielding scimitar drow elf who can't be lawful or good, but he can be chaotic good. He's kind of that roguish guy with a heart of gold, with a lot of evil tendencies he's trying to overcome and avoid. So he can't. I think I put him in that slot mostly as a storytelling thing. I think lately he's definitely trended more chaotic neutral because he's still fighting the white vampire demon thing inside him. But he's not really wholesale evil. Only briefly after Shag Nasty does he kind of go evil, I think.
I'll say up until Shag Nasty, he is something good, chaotic good, maybe. And after that, he is something neutral, though I'm not sure what.
I think he's chaotic always. And he trends between good, and then after Shag Nasty trauma, he says, fuck everything, chaotic neutral type.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I see the thing with Shag Nasty, it happened, and then it's so quickly resolved because the next book is changes, and he's hatting up to save his niece. And then after that, Harry's gone, and he's still with Justine, and Justine's helping with his dietitian stuff. He never really, like, he goes, if you want to call it evil, when he kills those girls, but he's also basically out of his mind. So he never really takes that dip into the evil pond.
I can see that.
It would be basically an alignment shift that's forced on him because of drama.
Right. Like, he talks a good game at the end of Turncoat, but even at the end, he's, kind of chuckling and smiling back at Harry when he hexes those headsets. So he's still in there, and he's still him, but he's just trying not to remember how much it hurts that he did all that.
And once Harry mentions Justine, I think is the turning point away from embracing any kind of evil and giving up the fight. Harry reminds Thomas of Justine in their conversation at the end of Turncoat, and that itself reawakens Thomas wanting to fight his inner self for choosing to be good, or choosing to do the right thing, or to do less harm. So
I don't think Thomas would ever go in the evil pond as long as Harry and Justine are alive, either of them.
It's because you guys aren't thinking like paladins. So
I think they are definitely the ties to his humanity.
Well, especially
right. The thing, I mean, so if we went classic D&D, he'd be evil anyway, just by nature of being a vampire. But what I was thinking is like, would he show up if you did detect evil? Would he show up as evil just because he's got the demon in him? So
no.
while he makes his choices and whatnot towards good, and I agree that Justine is like a huge part of his humanity, right? And why she's vitally important there. But I also don't want to undersell, like, you're talking about Turncoat and changes, but we haven't mentioned in Ghost Story, we get to see, he's still dealing with some of what happened from Shag Nasty. He's just not, we haven't seen the wallowing part, because we only get a taste in Ghost Story, and I felt like that was a lot to do with it, right? The whole point of Justine taking control of his diet, as you put it, was the fact that he's been hiding out in his apartment, was the impression that I got and what I remember.
He's been wallowing. Ever since Harry died, he's been depressed and he hasn't been eating or something.
Yeah, well, imagine fuck everything, something neutral, and I would say chaotic because he's not like trying to do anything with that. He's just stuck in a depression.
Well, and he's actively harming himself, so I mean that's chaotic at a minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can definitely see him trend good because I mean we don't know necessarily right where he's at. So I would totally see it neutral, and we'll see what happens in peace talks and whatnot. But I mean, mostly
and
it's
whenever he becomes the bearer for Amarachius.
Well, then he's going to be lawful good, right? Because paladin. So
it's a paladin, lawful good.
Peace talks.
Okay, so we're chaotic. We're on the fence a little bit on whether he's good or neutral.
I think he's definitely trending good with some trauma forcing him neutral because depression. Right. That's my opinion.
Well, yeah, and his actions. I think when Harry shows up and he says, "Hey, I need help," I think Thomas is going to be there.
Oh yeah.
So.
And he was immediately in Cold Days.
He was there before Mary even knew what he was. So.
Right. Fair point. So, chaotic good.
Fine by
yeah, chaotic good.
Who's next on our list?
Langtree.
The squeaky door.
Lawful good, and
we all went lawful though, so that's an agreement.
I think the important thing to remember with Langtree is a lot of his actions where he's just a complete jerk were absolutely under the influence of Peabody, right? So
or was he doing the thing as Harry described, the Warden's looking at Harry and in turncoat of this guy is a huge liability and I'm scared of him. And not just Peabody.
Well, I think it was with Peabody's influence, it emphasizes his tendencies as a person, right? That's kind of what was hinted at when Molly talked about.
That Peabody was using this magic to like kind of push the personality traits. Since you can't really bend or break like an old wizard that much, he's pushing the personality traits he thinks will forward his cause.
Yeah, he's highlighting
right.
Highlighting them is what is described as.
Yeah. So Langtree is super defensive, but he's also a specialist in wards when doing the war. Once he's free of Peabody's influence, he says, "Screw that! We're going to burn the Red Court down to the ground," and changes. Right.
So you think he was being highlighted with a defensive mind?
Yes.
And that's why he was stalling so long.
I don't know if
like
this
that.
is fan theory discussion.
That is still really good though.
Yeah, I mean, it's a first I've heard it and I like it. So but
Senpai noticed me.
I was definitely thinking that my thought is that he's lawful neutral, but I think
that was my thought as well.
Drawing the line between what we saw, because look, I loved what we saw in Changes, but it was a throwaway line as far as I'm concerned because he hasn't done anything about it. He's like, fuck them, fuck everybody, we're gonna burn them to the last man, and then we're gonna sit on the sidelines while Dresden does it. At the end.
Well, it just takes him longer to act because he is so lawful. He tries to think about things in an organized way and be very calculating and political. But he's a political and calculating creature. I don't think he's really good or evil. He's just amoral, as far as I can tell.
So neutral.
Yeah, neutral and then lawful.
Right. Well, because the other thing to think about is like Lucio's example, where like if we got involved in every squabble, we'd be talking about civil war among the council. And so the part of why he tries to stick to the neutral is because otherwise people are going to fight people, like presumably happened in the French and Indian War. So and it's not like that's the only example. That was probably just one of the more recent examples. I tend to think that the council was busy kicking or trying to kick Kemmler's ass during World War I and II. So there probably wasn't as much, civil war potential there. But yeah, I think he's definitely lawful neutral. Long story short.
I think he thinks of himself as lawful good.
Maybe.
Oh well, yeah. He's so lawful. He thinks the law is
protector.
See, the way I see lawful good, there's kind of two ends. You've got your general, like, Paladin Michael end, and then you've got your zealot end where you got Morgan. And I don't think Langtree really goes into the good because he's lawful to the point where he's, even with his highlighted sense of defensive mindedness being gone in Changes, Harry, you stand down. I don't care about this kid. You're doing it my way because this is the right way.
Right.
And that's,
It is interesting how much he was trying to kill Molly. Even after a whole bunch of reasons of it's okay, I'm going to take responsibility for her. And he still
look who was doing it.
He could still think of it as a whole liability, but then he'd have the whole reasons to kill both of them, and he was still trying to kill her right then.
But Peabody was actually at the trial too. At the trial and proven guilty. So that's at least that's headcanon for me that the explicit influence of Peabody was there to emphasize the politicizing, and Dresden's narration saying that I shouldn't have wronged him or made him lose face politically is really on the money.
I don't think Peabody could influence him while just the influence would have already happened. It's over time, subtle.
Yeah.
But I think the reason Peabody's there is so that when he's a big character in a couple of books later, when someone can be like, aha, I remember him from a couple of books ago and that meeting.
Yeah. Butcher just plants the seeds and they sprout.
Yeah.
Molly's situation was kind of a perfect storm because you have the one person who's willing to stick up for her is the one person Langtree would most like to kill, essentially. Highlighted or not, I mean, even if it's highlighted, even if we want to attribute it to that, it's already something to build on. He does not think Harry is worth the trouble. And now this guy is going to take an admitted warlock who used mind magic to screw with people, which is something he's intimately familiar with because that's his main other area of skill is the mind. And he's just seeing red lights all over the place.
Can you imagine if Langtree actually like got rid of Harry, like legally or whatever, but like basically got Harry killed? Like Ebenezer would not stand for that.
Somebody's not walking away from that fight alive.
Yeah.
Right.
There's either a new Merlin or a new Blackstaff.
I'm just thinking, what is Langtree must know that. I don't know that he's not gonna accept that would happen, unless he's clueless about how much Langtree actually cares about Harry. But I don't think.
I think Langtree also has a sort of self-aggrandization of himself. Like he thinks that he knows what's right. He can handle what comes, even if it was it would be necessary, and he could handle the fallout, whatever came, if that's what he decided to do.
Right. If there would be a tinge of evil in him, it would be strictly on his personal pride. But ultimately, I think he still wants what's right, but only strictly if he's in charge. Well, maybe he'd want the right. He only believes that the right thing would happen if he's in charge. So ultimately, just a lawful creature, amoral.
How much of that is Peabody now? Because I now that almost everything we've seen of him, Peabody's been there.
But yeah, but I think a lot of Peabody, we can't judge. Like we can't say what if Peabody didn't because we haven't seen that.
Well,
right.
The foil there, I think, would be Ebenezer, right? Like theoretically, Ebenezer's known Langtree longer than Peabody was around, and
he said as much.
Right, and so he knows he didn't see anything so out of Langtree's personality that it tipped him off something was going on. So Langtree's probably always been, they've always butted heads. They've always been, at odds, but he knows that he's defensively minded. He knows that he's kick-ass at wards and all this other shit. Like, they're both young hotheads, but like kind of what we talked about, Ebenezer was probably very chaotic, in his youth. And I could see Langtree being still the stiff upper lip British, aristocrat type, so where he's just like, this is the line, we don't cross the line. And Ebenezer wants to do good and save people, Yeah,
because it's just that if we want to include, the whole what is Peabody influence, and then is that their true alignment, then we would have to think about that for Ebenezer too. Maybe he is still very chaotic good like Harry was, and like he was influenced to be more neutral because of Peabody.
And honestly, I'm coming up short even saying, like, maybe you guys picked up a detail that I'm not remembering, but I'm pulling up short saying that Peabody influenced alignment. I think the ink was a suggestion. He's like, hey, do what I say, not necessarily change what you do, if that makes sense.
He pushed certain attributes in people. Like, for example, Anastasia kind of liked Harry as a person, so he pushed that to turn it into something else.
Right.
But she was also younger and more susceptible to it,
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's true. She's way more susceptible, but
basically all Peabody was doing is highlighting certain parts of their personality, like highlighting defensiveness or highlighting narcissism to make Langtree think like I have to be the one in charge. And it makes it one point that Peabody can control. So if we're talking about if any fault he has is to do with his pride, maybe that's overblown based on Peabody's influences and not as much as something that he actually has in his real personality.
Well, it's I think it's still true to his, as far as alignment goes. Maybe it influences his personality, makes him a little bit more craven, but I just thought it would be a useful metric for discerning a character's alignment, because it makes the character more of what they are, if only in ways convenient to Peabody. So that's kind of where I'm going with it, though, I would say.
Yeah, becoming more of a slave to your already instincts, but it's not really changing you.
Right. Which makes he acts even more lawful, so we know he's lawful, but he's not really looking for good or bad or good or evil. The dominant characteristic in terms of alignments would be lawful neutral. So anyway.
Right.
Well, for him, and for most wizards, I think it's status quo.
Yeah, lawful stable.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's all defensive, right? So we're lawful defensive, but since that's not one of the three pillars, I think neutral is the better indicator of that. You know, keep the status quo, make sure we don't lose anything, make sure we don't overextend and cause shit, you know, that's going to upset the balance of power, you know, anything like that. To me, all screams lawful neutral, you know, and a lot of it is, you know, it's his law or it's council law, you know, or whatever. It's not like the higher power. There's no morality, like you've said. You know, because the 7 laws of magic at the end of the day, like they're a restriction on power for mortal mages. You know, that's not necessarily like, I mean, it probably started out with goodness in mind, but Langtree is definitely not wielding it like that. I don't think so. But
so lawful neutral, and we'll move on. I am gonna switch it. We're gonna do Leah and basically fairies next, because this is probably going to be a discussion that lasts a long time.
Ooh.
I want to hear from EG first, because I see
Eldest,
a look
rough.
Well, I mean, I guess there's that too, but
yeah.
For the longest time, I would have gone with chaotic evil, but I feel like I was being informed just by post Nemesis Leah and her kind of going crazy at chicken pizza. So I switched it because I'm pretty sure, as a general rule, the fairies, especially, you know, the Shadi, yeah, she, thank you, are pretty much all, by dint of their nature, lawful. They have certain characteristics they cannot break. She can't go against Mab's word unless she's completely erased, basically, or being influenced by something like Nemesis. So I switched it more towards lawful evil with like chaotic tendencies, if that makes sense. Her natural inclination is to be chaotic, and she doesn't care who gets hurt, but her nature dictates she has to be lawful at least half the time, if not all the time.
See, and I think that's what's tough to me, is because like so they're not allowed to lie. That seems pretty lawful. They have to follow these rules. They've got Mab's, you know, accords, you know, the Unseelie Accords and everything like that. But at the same time, they're fucking murder hobos. You know, like literally, like, I mean, especially the Winter Court, obviously, you know, so there might be some differences between winter and summer, at least, you know, on a grand scale. But like the Red Cap, or, you know, Leah, or Maeve, which, I mean, she was Nemesis, so that's going to influence it there as well. But like across the board, with the exception of their nature, they're fucking chaotic. And I mean, to pull a conversation we had with Alex, you know, they're forces of nature, so they're beyond morality and alignment, right? In a way, maybe that's the better answer. But yeah, to me, like,
I think she just needs a triple, and lawful, chaotic, neutral.
Lawful, chaotic, evil for sure. But like, I mean,
I think more neutral than evil, but
I think it depends on the fairy, because if Leah is definitely more neutral than the Red Cap. The Red Cap is the murder hobo all the way.
Like literally, I mean,
basically created it.
Yes.
But Leah, like when she's getting Nemesis, she hates it. She wants to be what she is, so she goes to Mab for help, essentially, and Maeve didn't, because Maeve embraced it. So there's that kind of like, Leah is more neutral than Maeve was. Maeve seems to be lawful, chaotic, evil. Like, she's still stuck by the lawful. She's becoming more chaotic, and she wants to just destroy everything.
But is that because Leia didn't want to be evil, or is it because Leia just wanted to be herself and her way?
I think it wants to be herself. But the Cat Sith seemed to have the same reaction when he seemed to be Nemesis. He was fighting the Nemesis because it wasn't him. It wasn't what he was. Because it wasn't
his nature. And
he hated it, though, because like Nemesis was breaking Maeve's nature, but she embraced it. There's that amount of choice there.
Right. I think the ultimate guarantor of looking at somebody's alignment would be, what are they choosing to do? I know there's no free will in the Dresdenverse, but what are they choosing to do given their restrictions? And fairies are, though they're bound to laws, they spend all their time lying and breaking the laws in ways that aren't lying or breaking the laws. Lily in Proven Guilty is a good example of that. her triumphal help of Harry is by this convoluted way of following the law, but it's entirely in the spirit of breaking the law. So I think fairies spend their time. It's almost like a game where there's the rules, and you have to see how you can break them while not breaking them. So I think Leah definitely fits in the chaotic evil category for me, and her defining moment is the chicken pizza, where she's free of Nemesis, and she does what she wants, and she would keep Harry a hound as long as she could, but it wouldn't follow the arrangement she had made with Mab or with
Margaret,
or with Margaret, right? So I think Leia is just that well constrained by laws, and she would want to be a wicked fairy, but she can't in regards to Harry as much as she would like.
I mean, she kind of could. As she described at one point, like, if she keeps Harry a hound, then he is safe.
Yeah, he can't get into trouble.
He can't get himself into trouble. He's contained. She can control him and keep him safe. So based on what we assume the agreement was with Margaret, she's true to her word and whatever motivation she had. And I really, really wonder what her motivations were for accepting a deal with Margaret, because I don't think there's any compulsion, real, like, lawful compulsion for a fairy to accept whatever deal is happening. If Margaret opened up the idea of a deal with her, Leah still had a choice to accept it or not.
It might have been knowledge of the ways. It might have been, and because Leah did actually own that for a time, and was able to get around to Harry whenever Harry needed it and defend the other side of his apartment from the Never Never. So it might have been that.
I mean, the reason she was always near Harry was because she literally lived the same place as Harry, spiritually. She was not far away.
The reason I don't.
What was that?
Said she lived the reason she was always near Harry until she was like caught up in the whole Nemesis thing anyway, is that she literally lived where Harry lives, like, so that's why she was always around. Not because she knew the ways, she might have, but it was because she lived right on them.
Right, the garden.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She also seems to have an inclination towards, the reason I don't think neutral, I mean, we can go with the lawful and the chaotic. I think we have a general consensus that there's a blend there, at least of some degree. The reason I think evil is because, one, we have the word of Jim, that the way she made her bones was impressing Mab by drinking people's blood like a vampire. So, and every time she tries to make a deal, there is a decidedly negative, by any moral standards, impact. She wants Michael and Charity's firstborn kid. She wants Susan's memories or her virginity or whatever it was. She talks about how she hasn't sacrificed a virgin in ages in Changes. I mean, she's all about killing and hurting as per her general winter nature. They'd say, like, if you want to say summer trends towards lawful or chaotic neutral, probably more, and winter tends more to the evil, even if there's reasons for it. It's still, Mab is our bad guy, but she's a bad guy.
But is she? I don't know. In Cold Case, the Winter Lady, Molly Carpenter, is constrained by the laws and has to play all the games that Lily did. But what if Mab's doing the same thing? She's constrained by laws from Mother Winter. Queen of the Wicked Fairies, but maybe she's not a wicked fairy herself. She was mortal once.
I think
her
the
nature would
split
change.
I think the split needs to be like, they're not lawful because they choose it, therefore that's not their personality. They're constrained by these rules, and who made them and where is like an interesting conversation, because I mean they're Mab's accords, right? But even she was probably driven to make them, for some reason. Like, right. I don't really see Mab just waking up one day and saying, yeah, let's do the Accords. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, and the Accords are relatively modern. Like, they were signed like 15 years ago, I think he said in one of the books. I don't remember which one.
Oh, no, I think it's longer than that.
It was 96.
They might have been around, but they were re-signed sometime in the 90s.
Right.
And so she's enforcing them. But I think the Accords as an idea, we're stretching back a little bit further than that, but that's still
How
modern.
How long has Winter been in charge of the Outer Gate?
1066.
Give or take.
Right.
This is what I was thinking is whoever currently holds the mantle or the responsibility of protecting us at the outer gates are also the enforcers of some sort of accords, maybe. Since it doesn't
Yes.
Do you
fit
really
Winter's
think the Norse
nature.
gods enforced accords? Like, as a strict rule, the way that Mab does?
Kind of, because the fairies, in a way, like still their legends are based in Norse lore, right? You know,
Some of them.
well, yeah, I mean, it's not like a 1-to-1, but like you still had the rules. You still had. I mean, I just read a bunch of Thor and Loki get into mischief, so I'm trying to think. The shenanigans between them and the giants. Like, in a way, the giants were the fairies in some of the stories. They had the same kind of tricks and same kind of shenanigans. So
By Norse mythology, that's where elves come from,
right,
and fairies in general, and then they were kind of redefined into what we think of them today in a lot of things in Lord of the Rings and more. And so it's very wishy-washy. But and the fairies from Norse mythology has very little to do with fairies and elves and how we think about them today.
Well,
Definitely more based on folklore and Dresden Files than they are in popular mythos.
right.
But the Svart elves and the fairies are distinct as of Skin Game, even though earlier
That's because they are
something
distinct.
extra.
The Swat elves are distinct things in Norse mythology.
I mean, they are, but they're not, right? Like, in a way, I mean, they are, but
They are their
could
own
still,
people in their own realm, at least.
right?
Yeah, they're
but
okay. Hold on.
they're still
They're
going to be
fairies. They can't touch iron, but they're not part of the winter or summer courts.
Sure.
No,
Yeah.
Svart elves can work with steel, though. They have the steel manacles in Skin Game.
It's a fairy metal, though.
Yeah. Yeah, because
Yeah, and Harry said he had to pay extra so that they would work for his circle.
But Nicodemus's thorn manacles that he has on Harry and Asher in Skin Game
they were
are made of steel. They're Svart elf made, not fairy made. That's what
They
Nicodemus says. I
are,
think
Right, yeah,
it's-
you can get a Svart elf to work with iron, but you got to pay for it, presumably because it is a detriment to them,
it could be harmful.
at least to some degree.
yeah.
And it's definitely harmful because he does like Jesus specifically say he had to pay the Sword Elf extra to work with the circle.
Right.
And the metals that he did.
True.
I think it would be interesting if the fairies were based on real life Norse fairies.
This
Because
is not the tangent I thought we would get on this episode.
No, I just had a funny
If
thought
that's the
though about
case.
that whole thing. What if the Sword Elves can touch iron and they're just charging extra because they're like used car salesmen? Just like, well, I mean, we can get
who
away
else are
with
you
it.
going to go to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
that would be shrewd. It would be very
But
fair.
that would be it'd be interesting if fairies had the Norse connection, because then we'd be blending the pantheons. At the very least, it seems like the Fates, the Furies, have a fairy queen connection based on Hades' vault.
Well,
not just
there's-
that, but Scold, right?
Yeah,
Like,
he used
Mother
the
Winter.
name
Atropos.
for Mother Winter. That is the equivalent in Norse mythology. So it is her. She said it's not a wrong name to use.
The Greek
She-
one too. They all
Yeah,
say
she doesn't. I think what it comes down to is she used to go by those names, but she doesn't anymore. So they still are familiar to her, but not necessarily hold any power over her. Which is
Seems to
an
me
interesting
that-
thing too. But
These primordial beings, almost like the queens, all three of them, for each
Not
side.
The mantles might be, but only the queen mothers are primordial entities. The others just are extensions. Mab wasn't always. Mab was mortal once, and she wasn't always a winter.
Well, the mantles and by extension, the people who wear them are all represented in different mythologies, and I think they're all the same mantle, all just reappearing in several different mythologies.
yeah. See, the way I've always viewed, well, I shouldn't say always, the way I tend to view it is the reason that the Fae were chosen is because they were this existing group of people. And whoever the last Guardians were, they were always trending towards being dependent on worship. The Greek, the Norse, your power comes from how much you're venerated, very Wrath of the Titans, like the less veneration you get, the less strong you are. And so they needed to create a power set where it wasn't dependent on faith. You still needed knowledge and a general connection to the mortal world, but you had these mantles that acted on their own. If the person died, the power still existed and it went to a new person, and it was much more stable because every other time there was this giant cycle of every 1,000, 2,000 years, we got to pick a new person and reality is under threat. So they made these mantles with these aspects of other gods. Maybe they sacrificed them on the stone table. Maybe they were just the entities naturally evolving that way. Whatever it was, there are hints. So you have the mothers like Mother Winter who get 2 of the fates, and Baba Yaga already as part of their connection. So there are definitely ties back to the other pantheons. It's just a matter of when and how it all got fashioned.
I kind of like
that connection was always there, or as you said, maybe it was kind of forged, like they were transformed into these mantles.
Right. I tend to think, for example, the mantle of Winter Queen is not eternal. It hasn't been around forever. It was kind of made because it had to be made. Now, it may be really old. It may be 1, 2, 3, 4,000 years old. But in general, it didn't just kind of exist. People had to make it because otherwise there's no reason for the Sidhe to have really been created, as we know from Word of Jin Tidbit to be the case.
So the Sidhe were in fact created rather than just kind of corralled?
They were created for a purpose, quote unquote. So it's essentially what I think it is the fairies existed and they were imbued with more of this power and they sort of evolved into the Sidhe, which is the ruling class. You know, your mantle holders, your Leias, your
so they kind of started out like Toot, like
right. They were trolls and fairies and all sorts of creatures, and then they were given a power and a purpose to become more.
I like that idea. I'm not sure I wholly unhitch it to the belief though, because we have the whole idea about the Brothers Grimm being a huge setback in the war against the fairies with the Oblivion War and everything like that, right? But I do like the idea of the mantles that were made to unhook the power from the vessel in a way. Like if Thor got killed, if his power goes with him, that's not very useful. But if we made Thor a mantle, if he gets killed, fuck him, get a new Thor. Another day, another Doug, you know, so.
And belief is definitely a part of it. It's less the distinction between belief. It's a distinction as I see it between belief and worship, veneration.
I don't know if fairies
I
need
know a
belief
thing.
as much as they need people to make pacts with them, and people can't make a deal with something they don't know exists. So Brothers Grimm is necessary for like, oh, there's this thing, go call its name 3 times and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. I just always saw the main distinction as being they're not gods because people don't think of them as gods. People don't worship them as gods. They're not setting up altars to make a sacrifice towards them. But you still have to have a foundation. You have to have a belief. You have to have a knowledge of them in order for them to have their tether.
I like it.
So alignments?
Chaotic evil. But I mean, if we're going to constrict it to Leah, right, then I think she's got her nature part. There's definitely rules she has to follow, kind of like we're beholden to gravity, right? So she's got things she can't do, isn't the same as choosing to do those things. So I think chaotic evil because she's a fucking murder hobo at heart. Like she definitely was like in changes. I mean, I think here's the thing that clinches it for me. All the evidence definitely adds to it. But, you know, the words indulge yourself come to mind. So it was like, hey, how far can I take it? Indulge yourself. Okay.
There's a wide grin at, hearing that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
She's chaotic evil, and the Sidhe as a whole are neutral in their, not necessarily, they're lawful in their essence, but not in their like who they choose to be. They would choose very differently if they weren't constricted by this lawfulness that they are.
It's sort of like the dynamic between Thomas and his demon. Which are we really detecting evil on, or which are we really detecting alignment on? Are we detecting on the impulses and predilections, or are we detecting it on how he interacts with that? So
I mean, the white courts, as I understand it, and the rules of the Dresden verse, are still considered mortal, and are like free, like they can live a long time, but they're mortal in the sense of like they have free will.
Who, the fairies?
White court.
Oh, the white court. Yeah, I mean they're more mortal, right? Because there's layers of mortalness,
Yes,
right?
but
Because
what I mean
because like
mortalness is that
changelings,
they have free will and are, like the whole the way the white god works to just protect free will. That's like really what seems to matters to the white god and the angels is free will is everything, and by that definition, the white court, they all have free will, even when they're slave, like even when they're like fully active, they have free will.
I think I'm going to put them in an N-1 category to be a nerd here for a second. I think I'm going to put them in the same category as the changelings because I think they have free will up to a point, up to a decision, and then it starts to get changed, right? So, like Inari had free will. Mm-hmm. Inari, after her 18th birthday and the first time she either does it in true love or kills somebody, that's a decision, and she no longer has like pure free will, right? She then becomes a creature versus a mortal, If
we were to look at it in the way they designed it in the Dresden Files RPG,
right?
You have free will, and once you have free will, you can be a para character. And when you give that up, by for example, a half-turned red court kills someone, you give that up, and you can no longer play that character. You can play a white court vampire,
right?
You can't play a fairy then.
No, you can play a changeling.
The Wraiths are an interesting, I think, when it comes to the free will aspect, because they are very specifically not allowed to know what they are. And they can't control it on the first feeding. Every single one of them, the first feeding is lethal, specifically because Lord Wraith is like, okay, one, I'm not going to tell you what you are. Two, you have no experience or control over this. So, yeah, you're free will because you're a person and you go along doing this, that, and the other thing. But in the same way that Molly in Cold Case, is going along with Carlos, yeah, she's being pushed to it, but she also wants to. And then she ceases to be, and Carlos suffers the consequences for that. That's not free will. No. That's something taking over and doing through you.
Yeah, but
I think that's the model of how fairies have to behave. Right? So that's exactly the right example.
Well, especially the Mantle Holders, certainly. Yeah, I mean they
especially the queens. The queens might trend a little bit more. The ladies might trend a little more chaotic, but I think both fairy queens, Titania and Mab, are both lawful neutral. I don't think they're evil at all.
Especially definitely evil. I was going to say I want to steer clear of the Mab conversation because I think Cold Case is definitely going to be a big indication on that, right? Like we might have had some room to argue that at some point, but unless we want to take another 20 minutes, I figure we should avoid. We'll save Mab if we do a round 3, so we'll leave that up to the director. But
so just Mab then, just that episode.
Yeah. Just alignment of Mab. End of episode.
Mab and Titania. Yeah,
we're gonna need 2 hours.
I don't know if it's that complicated. I just know
I don't think it is, but I know we're going to argue about
it. Yeah, I know we're over today, aren't we? So
I think so. We started at an awkward time, so it's hard to track. But I think we're just at about an hour, and we didn't talk about at least one person on the list of 5.
The easiest one.
Yeah,
you say that.
Yeah,
that's the one Justin was excited about. So definitely going to be interesting.
She does have a bit of an arc, yeah. So
I was going to say, if anybody has a clear alignment shift, in my opinion.
She shifts its alignments, but she starts,
And we're not going to tell you who this person is because you have to listen to part 3.
Yeah. Everybody couldn't guess, based off of it rhymes with no.
Okay. Plug anything that we have important.
Well, how about this? Do our guests have anything they would like to plug?
I'll set up a PayPal if people want to send me money, but that's all.
Right.
You just want to plug your Reddit posts for more karma?
Nah. I can't spend karma. It doesn't really. It's hollow.
But you could get gold, apparently.
Yeah.
Apparently, he gets it by posting reposts of gifts.
I had one gilded comment, and that was because it was in prequel memes, and that is my proudest one because it's so easy.
I'll have to go look that one up. So,
It was easy. It was like a sex post, and I just put, she's gone up the ventilation shaft. It was easy. It was perfect.
Nice. All right. Okay. So as far as other podcasts, Ben, unless you had something you wanted to plug.
Nope.
Okay. So as far as our other podcasts, we have Dangerous to Go Alone in case you need an adult. It's a podcast about nerd and geek culture. We have the Great Scott Podcast, which is a podcast about The Office. And then we have High Fantasy, which has got the director in it. So you know what I'm going to ask you.
What's about? We weren't able to do the geography episode last time because a surprise family visit fucked up with our schedule. So, still geography.
Still geography. Okay. And then it's us and Sim Talk. So Sim Talk is one that Jacob started doing from the 42. He says it's been kicked off pretty well. So he's pretty excited. If you like simulations and other nerdy math programming things.
Yeah, nerd in terms of like, how do I build this thing for work? Not nerd as in like comic books or video games.
Yeah, not pop culture nerd. So, I mean, I'm sure he's got the occasional geek, huh? So watch Jacob eat live chickens on live television. So,
what would we characterize that as an alignment exactly?
Eating live chickens. It depends. Is he doing it out of necessity or for entertainment purposes?
Obviously, entertainment purposes.
Chaotic. Yeah, right. Unless there was an overpopulation of chickens and he was doing it for the good of the land, then it'd be chaotic good.
I don't know. Where does he live?
Really? Wait, no, the other one, Pittsburgh.
Yep, that's not an overpopulation of chickens there.
So chaotic evil for like reducing the population of chickens. Okay.
For eating live chicken for entertainment.
He
has definitely
spoken.
From the chicken's perspective, it's chaotic evil, right?
Don't
Do you want to watch
that?
Yeah, he has spoken. This is now the decision. Eating live chickens for entertainment in Pittsburgh is chaotic evil.
Right.
That's Montana. We can have a discussion.
I was like, I like how it's geographically specific. That's my favorite. Like,
absolutely.
Well, I was lawful good, but then we went over here, and now I'm chaotic.
And I went
evil.
to Brazil, and now I'm a drug runner.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm hitting the button now. Bye bye.
Oh boy.